Good evening, everybody. Sorry this video is coming out so late, but I just feel like this story needs to be talked about by me. I need to talk about it because of all the things that I've covered this year. I have not actually covered Yemen. So first and foremost, I hope everyone had a happy and wonderful Thanksgiving, enjoying a meal with their family, friends, eating until you couldn't eat anymore, and then preparing to do more over the top consumer related activities when you go shopping tomorrow for Black Friday. Um, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and that's pretty much the story of our planet these days as we see just rampant consumerism in many of the first world countries, and yet still in many second and third world countries. Just the worst of the worst situations happening. Just take Mexico, for instance, or Honduras, or many of the countries in Central America with the waves and waves of migrants that are trying to escape the ridiculously despicable situations that they have to deal with in their countries. Just take things that might be happening right across the city or across the street from you sometimes, where people just don't have what they need to survive on a day-to-day basis. But this story really just sickens me, and I'm talking about Yemen, the country of Yemen, where 85,000 children in Yemen may have died, according to this New York Times article that was posted yesterday on November 21st. The United States announced on Wednesday that peace talks to end the war in Yemen would begin next month in Sweden. The announcement came amid growing global pressure to stop the bombing campaigns by a Saudi led coalition that have unleashed conditions amounting to possible war crimes, according to a United Nations report in August. Now, I think part of me, I don't know why I really didn't report on this earlier, but I probably should have. I saw the pictures. I think for a while we were dealing with Syria. Syria was the big story, the Syrian civil war. And no one really talked about what was happening in Yemen because everyone was all buddy-buddy with the Sauds. But now things have seemed to change. Now you've got countries in Europe that are backing out of deals to aid the Sauds, Saudi Arabia, with weapons. You had the whole Khashoggi killing by, and again, Donald Trump won't admit this, but by the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin whatever his last name is. So you've got a lot of things now that are starting to turn against the Saudi in general, this Saudi-led coalition. So the announcement by Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis at the Pentagon came on the heels of a statement by the aid agency Save the Children on Wednesday that underscored the harrowing nature of the conflict. An estimated 85,000 children might have died of hunger since the bombings began in 2015. 85,000 people is equivalent to a medium-sized stadium here in the U.S. And since 2015, 85,000 children, and that's, I believe, a conservative estimate, dying just from starvation. That has to be one of the worst types of ways to die. A slow and painful death because you cannot get enough calories to sustain yourself, to sustain your life. I mean, this is basically like genocide in a way. They are starving these people, and we're just taking our time, I guess, in stopping this. It's amazing to me how quickly Donald Trump met with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong Un. Yet this, which has been going on since 2015, it's been 3 years now, and it's just crazy to me. Experts say Yemen has become the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and 14 million people could soon be at or on the brink of starvation, according to the United Nations. For every child killed by bombs and bullets, dozens are starving to death, and it's entirely preventable. Tamer Karolos of Save the Children, he's the country director for Yemen, said in a statement, children who die in this way suffer immensely as their vital organ functions slow down and eventually stop. And again, that's literally got to be the worst way to die. The statement said that 85,000 was a conservative estimate of how many children under the age of 5. So this is terrible. Had starved between April 2015, when Saudi Arabia began its air war, and this October. Can anyone tell me why they went to war with Yemen? I really need to know. In addition to the airstrike, Saudi Arabia has imposed economic sanctions and blockades on Yemen, contributing to the deepening humanitarian crisis. David Beasley, the managing director of the World Food Program, visited Yemen last week and painted a dire portrait of the situation. What I have seen in Yemen this week is the stuff of nightmares, of horror, of deprivation, of misery. And we, all of humanity, have only ourselves to blame, Mr. Beasley told the United Nations Security Council on Friday. Since the spring, the price of basic food staples has doubled. For a country that's dependent on imports for the basic needs of life, this is a disaster. This is crazy. As the death toll from the military operation worsens, rebuilding the economy has emerged as a priority to prevent widespread famine. And of course, the war is blocking the gateway for aid. Saudi Arabia intervened in Yemen's civil war, so Yemen was in the middle of a civil war back in April 2015 to fight the Shiite rebels backed by its regional rival Iran. So basically a proxy war in which Saudi Arabia, I guess, just completely went berserk on. But instead of a quick victory, the Saudi-led campaign evolved into a bloody stalemate. The bombardment, which relies heavily on arms and equipment from the United States, has torn the country asunder. Because of fighting around the port of Hudaydah, a crucial gateway for aid efforts, humanitarian programs have been scaled back. The United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, told the UN Security Council. Save the Children said it had been forced to reroute supplies for the north of the country through the southern port of Aden, with deliveries taking 3 weeks instead of 1. And according to Stephen Anderson, country director for the World Food Program in Yemen, 8.4 million people are considered to be severely food insecure, which is one step from a famine. Now, based on analysis and projections, that number could increase by 50% or so, said Anderson in a phone interview on Wednesday. Even if peace were to break out tomorrow, which is very unlikely, we've still got a massive humanitarian crisis on our hands. And then there's Trump. President Trump has defended Saudi Arabia's intervention in Yemen, blaming Iran for the conflict. Tehran said in a statement on Tuesday, he said in a statement on Tuesday, was responsible for a bloody proxy war against Saudi Arabia and Yemen, while Saudi Arabia would gladly withdraw from Yemen if the Iranians would agree to leave. In his embrace of Saudi Arabia, Mr. Trump has dismissed his own intelligence experts' conclusion that the kingdom's young de facto ruler, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, had ordered, of course, the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, fueled his America First agenda by touting a huge Saudi arms deal, and doubled down on the need for the Saudis to help in the Middle East to contain Iran. On Wednesday, Mr. Trump praised the Saudi for a drop in oil prices, writing on Twitter, "Oil prices getting lower, great, like a big tax cut for America and the world. Enjoy 54 was just $82 per barrel. Thank you to Saudi Arabia, but let's go lower." By largely absolving Prince Mohammed of any responsibility in the killing of Mr. Khashoggi, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, as we all know, Trump said. He ignores a documented list of humanitarian disasters and rights abuses by the kingdom, and his pardoning of Saudi Arabia could embolden autocrats across the globe, analysts say. This month, the United States said that it would end air refueling flights for the Saudi military campaign in Yemen and prepare sanctions against Saudis linked to the killing of Mr. Khashoggi, but those steps were seen as limited and in response to overwhelming international condemnation. The United States Agency for International Development has said that the United States was providing more than $566 million in aid to manage the humanitarian crisis. And in a fact sheet published on November 9th, it pointed to damage done to civilian infrastructure following the Saudi coalition's deployment around the port city of Hudaydah. Mr. Mattis did not specify a date for the peace talks for fear of coming out ahead of the United Nations announcement. It looks like that very, very early in December up in Sweden, he said in Washington, we'll see both the Houthi rebel side and the UN recognized government. President Hadi's government will be up there. Mr. Mattis added that the Saudi led coalition had stopped its offensive around Hudaydah before the talks. So, again, this is really, really terrible. My only hope is that peace talks come sooner than later. Because this is sad in my mind. This is just the worst thing that you could have are these poor, innocent young children just dying senselessly, unnecessarily, starving to death, famines. It just is beyond my comprehension that human beings could allow this to happen. Like, I could see you going to war against people, but I cannot see you going to war against people and then just allowing folks to die. Like, folks that you're not directly fighting, to cut off food supplies to people. Just doesn't make any sense to me. So my hope is that Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudis that are allowing this to happen and Donald Trump all stand for war crimes at the end of this, because that's pretty much what it is. We are slowly becoming a country that is looking like we are in some sort of axis of evil, and I cannot stand it. It makes me sick to my stomach. I would love to know what you think of this, if you even watch it this far. I'm pretty sure once you see Yemen, you will be like, I don't care. And that's the problem. We don't care. And we just let this tyrant of a president run his mouth while we stuff our mouths full of turkey and allow things like this to happen. I'll see you all tomorrow after you're done your Black Friday shopping. Peace out.